The new SPV3 release is here, and with it came a whole host of new additions, modifications to existing content, and various quality of life features and updates. I'm in a fortunate position where I haven't played SPV3 since maybe 2019. It's been so long that a lot of my memory on the experience has eroded. On top of the time that it's been since I last played it, I've changed quite a bit. Moods and opinions have shifted, and it was interesting to revisit this thing. Especially interesting due to my familiarity with MCC on PC to now compare it to. SPV3 was once upon a time the modern Halo PC game, but now it shares space with its slightly buggy but equally ambitious brother. How was my time with SPV3's final update? Well, let's get into that. If you find yourself enjoying the video, a like and a share would be appreciated. Talking about the graphics, animation, sound, and weight of SPV3 requires the understanding that the game engine powering this thing is over 20 years old now. The technology itself has inherent limitations that only grow more resistant to new and innovative content as time goes on. That's what makes SPV3 astonishing to me. It's often easy to forget that this is combat-evolved technology under the hood when you destroy a phantom and it shatters impressively in a violent explosion, or stumble upon environments with lighting that puts Halo 2, Combat Evolved's direct sequel, to shame. SPV3 initially had a rather bleak and war-torn filmic look to it that I found inappropriate within the context of Combat Evolved, which is a bit more fantastical and whimsical visually. Changes to the coloring and especially the bloom system, which I'll get into in a bit, have injected the game with a lot of life that I felt its scenery used to lack. I was stunned when coming out of the crashed escape pod on the ring and saw the sunset skybox for the level. On one hand, you have a deep orange glow that drenches the valley in a warm hue, but as you follow the band of the ring into the sky, away from the setting sun, the deep blackness of space is apparent. Something that I found Halo never quite recaptured after Combat Evolved is the emphasis on space in the skyboxes. Looking up into the sky and seeing the cosmos beyond the other side of the ring. It puts the size of the ring into perspective and makes the player feel small as they explore this cosmic wonder they're stranded on. While the skyboxes were an absolute treat to get lost in, the bloom system is something that I found really impressive. Halo 3 visually, I think, resonates with me the strongest, in no small part due to its excellent lighting, but also the clever way that it uses light bloom to place importance on explosions. We all remember how violent, blinding, and powerful the explosion of the Scarab was, right? The impact, I feel, was due in no small part to the bloom system that Halo 3 used, which blinded the player, overwhelmed you. SPV3's bloom system, similar to Halo 3's, was always working tirelessly to place great emphasis on powerful explosions, the heat of plasma fire, and the sun drenching open spaces in its warm glow. The game looks vibrant. One moment of gameplay that had me smiling quite a bit in Assault on the Control Room was coming out of a dark cave, moving towards the blinding light at the end of the tunnel, and having the light levels authentically adjust and balance out to reveal the massive sprawling canyon in front of me. It emulated the feeling of stumbling out of the dark, shielding your eyes from the initially harsh sun, and then having them adjust to reveal something wonderful. This isn't to say it's all perfect. There were some issues I found in the visual presentation that I think is a combination of art direction and also the tech and, unfortunately, just engine limitations. Artificial interiors such as the Pillar of Autumn or Forerunner environments I found to be a bit busy. Not that the detail in the environments is bad, but more so, I found myself often overstimulated by how much detail was in the environments at points. I'd easily lose track of enemies who'd get lost in a sea of lines, grooves, and harsh shadows on the floor and walls. It's an issue that I think is made worse by how the Combat Evolved engine can sort of muddy up the impressive shadowing work on display and cause things to look grainier and muddier than I think the developers intended it to look. Sound design for the most part is quite good, minus the burst weapons, which seem to struggle when the combat was busy.
That's how you do it, amigo!
But this is more so due to an issue with Combat Evolved's engine. You'll hear the sounds of bursts cutting in and out, making the weapon feel inconsistent, or even maybe like it's on a delay as the engine struggled to keep up with everything at once. I also didn't like the soundtrack that much, though it's a hard thing to criticize due to the composer, Havent, growing quite a lot as a musician since SPV3. The music in this game is reflective of a very different period for him as a composer. It's a portal back in time a few years ago, a time where his desire to prove his worth and impress us was so powerful that it often accidentally overcomposed and overpowered the rest of the audio spectrum. SPV3's soundtrack is often loud and harsh when it should be soft and subdued. It's usually attention-demanding when it should be atmospheric. And when the complex and bombastic tracks do finally arrive, like the Warthog run, it's sadly not that impressive since you're so desensitized to how loud and busy the music has consistently been up to this point. There's no real room for the music to rest. It's amped up to 11 at all times, and it does get a bit much. To be fair though, how do you really add to Halo's music? Halo Combat Evolved's soundtrack was composed and orchestrated around the very specific environments and moods of its campaign. The tone of each piece of music is pitch perfect. By adding to it, you risk actually disrupting the carefully prepared tone. It's actually why some folks are not fans of the remastered soundtracks for Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary or Halo 2 Anniversary. They often got too grand and fell out of sync with the original tones and atmospheres of these campaign environments. Now, none of these criticisms I feel are enough to drag the mood down though, because what I'm experiencing here is a playable, interactive passion project from Halo fans. When the engine chugs and buckles under a rather complicated explosion or set piece, and Havent's early music that he grew and learned from is just going off, I can't help but feel really happy for those involved in this production. SPV3 is a love letter to the game that started this franchise, and a demonstration that the Combat Evolved engine still has a lot of life left in it. And it's really impressive to see how everyone involved grew their skills by working on this thing over the last decade. The presentation here is messy, but it's the good kind of messy. The kind of messy that comes from practically tripping over yourself with passion and ambition. I like it. Being built off the back of Combat Evolved technology, there are tricks that you can do that carry over into SPV3, such as the ability to pocket reload weapons. But beyond that, the weapon sandbox I think is worth discussing. What makes Halo Sandboxes special in my opinion is not necessarily how many weapons there are, but rather what outside the box utilities each weapon can bring. As an example, Combat Evolved's assault rifle is a fine suppressive weapon for close quarters engagements, right? But it also has the fastest melee speed of any gun in the game. It can be used as an excellent melee tool for rapidly beating down a squad of fleeing grunts, or rapidly taking down a jackal before it can warn its friends during a stealth sequence. Halo's Sandbox is unique when the weapons are unique, when they're more than just a simplistic killing tool. SPV3's long development time has yielded rather interesting results. There are a lot of weapons in the sandbox. Some do feel like rather creative new weapons with mechanical and tactical reasons to equip them, or at the least keep them in your pocket for later, while other weapons feel as though they exist for flavor, which honestly I do think has value. Brutes typically have brutified versions of existing weapons that place an emphasis on heat and burn damage, something that is extremely valuable in helping you multitask during combat. Let me give you an example. If there's a particularly troublesome elite who is backed up by a squad of jackals or grunts that are draining your shields, maybe charge up a brute plasma pistol and set the elite ablaze. Let the fire eat away at his shields while you turn your attention to his annoying minions. By the time they are cleared out, the fire has probably cooked through the elite's shields, leaving him open to a headshot. The strength of SPV3's combat loop is that there's always about 4 or 5 different ways to disrupt and engage with the enemy forces using the sandbox. This isn't to say they're all super interesting mechanically, however. There is a lot of role redundancy in the SPV3 sandbox, with weapons like the DMR that don't really offer anything of tactical value. And when you do find a situation where the DMR could be useful as a long-range rifle, a sniper rifle is usually close by anyways. Normally, this kind of redundancy would annoy me. But what I think these weapons such as the silenced SMG, silenced pistol, DMR, etc. bring to the game is not so much tactical options, but rather aesthetic options, which I've grown to view as valuable in a game. It does feel cool to sneak under cover of night with a silenced ODST SMG. It does feel cool to use a DMR thanks to the excellent animations and sound design. Some of these weapons might not offer a lot, but they feel good to use. And the enemies themselves are quite a treat to fight against. The Covenant forces have been beefed up a whole lot with familiar and original enemy types. For every returning enemy type, like the Skirmisher from Halo Reach, there's something I've never seen before in a Halo game, such as new hunter types. While it's easy to view Sandbox as something player-focused, I do think it's worth exploring the ways that the enemies also interact with the sandbox, and for the most part, I really like the enemies I go up against. In the later game, the Flood are introduced, and a lot of care is taken in expanding them beyond what they were in the original game. I think this might be the best iteration of the Flood, at least on par with Halo 3. SPV3 is a big game, with a large sandbox, and while I found myself quite often drowning in options, I can't ever say that everything just kind of felt the same. The game offers a lot of different ways to be replayed, and the variety is one that I think players may find themselves enjoying. Experience is something that's highly subjective, and when coupled with the age of the Combat Evolved engine and the things that it's doing in this mod, it's safe to say that not everyone will have the same experience in terms of stability. Upon booting up SPV3's launcher for the first time in over a year, I was extremely happy to see an astonishing amount of graphics and experience options. There is a lot to fiddle and tweak with here. When I think to myself, well, maybe they forgot to include this thing, I'd have to stop myself because sure enough, the option I'd be looking for would be right there. Considering the notoriously inconsistent performance of SPV3 due to the tech it's built on, the developers going out of their way to provide players with ways to tweak and fiddle with the quality until it runs well on their systems is very appreciated. This is really good and proactive stuff from the developers. When diving into the game, I found the performance to be a bit of a messy affair. Frequently, the game would hitch up during moments when you could tell this 20-year-old engine was struggling to catch up with the ambitious scale that was being pushed. The game often crashed every hour or so, and while I certainly don't mind rebooting the game every now and then, I can understand how this would frustrate some. Now, what won't frustrate some are the ways to play and the customization on offer here. SPV3 offers a ton of ways to personalize the experience, such as various armors for the Master Chief to wear that do appear in cutscenes, such as the Craig mask. It also offers quite a lot of skulls, which act sort of like cheat codes, tweaking the game in subtle ways to overall create new and unique combat scenarios. Once you've grinded your way through the difficulty options, these skulls exist to provide newer and even more unique challenges. There are also optional side content, such as a remake of the famous fan campaign Lemuria, which I reviewed a while ago, and various side missions, such as the Silent Cartographer with the Arbiter as the playable character, and the Silent Cartographer Evolved, which acts as a sort of remix of the famous Halo level. And for those who do want something that acts as a distilled version of the SPV3 combat loop, Firefight is an excellent side game mode. It offers multiple different modes, difficulties, as well as goals to reach, and it's something I might see myself grinding out. As a package, I found the game experience to be absolutely worth my time. Not once did I ever feel like this package was wasting my time. Everything it offered felt as though serious consideration went into it. Even the small firefight mode, which could have been a simplistic and throwaway thing, feels carefully prepared and balanced. This is good stuff. SPV3 has finally come to an end. The vision that started over a decade ago has been finalized, and it's astonishing that this is free to play considering how much game is here. I'm still chewing through it as we speak. As a Halo experience, it is messy and ambitious. As a technical showcase for the Combat Evolved engine, this thing's an achievement. As a love letter to Halo Combat Evolved, it feels warm and passionate. SPV3 is not a replacement for Combat Evolved, but rather a direct dialogue with the entire Halo franchise by the developers within the Combat Evolved framework. Now, with the lessons learned from this game, the developers will be moving on to a new project codenamed Legacies, and I'm interested to see what lessons they learned from their time on SPV3. What did you all think of SPV3? Let me know in the comments, and with that being said, I'll see you all on the next video.